There is one word stamped on the blade of an old pocket knife that decides whether it is worth $20 or $1,500. It is not the brand name. The brand is usually the part people do look at, and on its own it tells you almost nothing. It is the word underneath it. And you cannot see it with the knife closed because it sits down at the base of the blade, right where the blade disappears into the handle. That spot is called the Tang. And what is stamped there is the Tang stamp. So before anything else, go and get whatever old knives are in the house. Open every blade. Look at the base of it. That one habit is most of what this video is about. Right here is how it works. Knife companies change their Tang stamps every so often, and collectors have mapped when. That means the stamp is a date. Case is the clearest example because they were the biggest and their records are the best known. A case knife stamped tested is from roughly 1920 to 1940. A case stamped XX is roughly 1940 to the mid-60s. Anything later carries a different arrangement again. So tested and XX are the two words you are hunting. A case knife from the tested era is a different object and a different price from a case knife made in 1985 with the same pattern and the same shape. Second thing that decides price, and it is the one you can see with the knife shut, the handle material. Bottom to top, it goes roughly like this. Plastic and modern synthetics are the cheap end. Then wood, then bone, which is far more common on good old knives than people expect, and comes in colors, jigged, and dyed. Then stag, which is real antler, and has an irregular, knobbly surface that no molded handle imitates well. Then mother of pearl, which is the top, and unmistakable once you have seen it, because it shifts color as you turn it. A knife with a pearl or stag handle is starting from a much higher floor than the same knife in wood. Third thing, condition, and specifically two parts of it, the snap and the blade. Open a blade halfway and let it go. A good knife snaps shut hard under its own spring. A tired one drifts. That spring is the mechanism, and a dead one is expensive to care about. Then look at the blade profile from the side. A knife that has been sharpened on a grinder for 40 years has a blade that has visibly shrunk, gone narrow, and swept back compared to the others in the same knife. Collectors call that a reprofiled blade, and it takes a large bite out of the value. An unsharpened or lightly sharpened blade, full width, is what you want. One thing we're saying plainly before we count. Ordinary old pocket knives are $50 to $500, and most sit near the bottom of that. What we are going through are the ones that break out of it. Number 10, the ordinary ones. Plastic or wood-handled knives from the 70s onward. Brand names you recognize from a hardware shop. One or two blades, no interesting stamp. $20 to $50, and often less. I start here so you know what ordinary feels like in the hand. Light, molded handle, no snap to speak of, brand printed rather than stamped. Put it down and move on. Number 9, Queen, from the early 1900s. Queen has been going since 1902, and it is the early ones that carry value. Later Queen is a decent working knife and not much more. What to look for? The Tang stamp again, and the handle. Early Queen with bone is where the interest is. And check whether the knife has its original blades rather than a mixed set, because knives got repaired with whatever was in the drawer. Number 8, anything with a stag handle. I am giving this a number of its own because it applies across every maker on this list, and because it is the single easiest upgrade to spot from across the table. Stag is real deer antler. It is irregular, it has ridges and pits that run in no pattern, and each side of the knife is slightly different because it came off an animal rather than out of a mold. Molded imitation stag repeats. Look at both handle slabs. If the pattern is identical on both, it is plastic. Stag on a maker worth having turns a $200 knife into a 4-figure one on several of the examples further up this list. Number 7, K-bar and the Union Cutlery knives behind it. Before it was K-bar, the company was Union Cutlery, and their early knives carry patent markings from around 1907. A Union Cut Company knife with a 1907 patent stamp and a Stag handle with the little fork accessory runs about $1,175. What to look for: the Union Cut Company name rather than K-bar, a patent date on the Tang, and Stag. That combination is the whole thing. Number 6, Boker, the Damascus ones. Boker is a name you will meet often, and most of what turns up is ordinary. The exceptions are the Damascus bladed knives. And Damascus is easy to identify because the steel has a visible flowing pattern in it, like wood grain or water. It is not etched on, it goes through the metal. A Boker Tirpitz liner lock with a Damascus blade and walnut inlays runs about $1,048. What to look for: hold the blade to the light and look for that flowing pattern. Then check that the pattern continues on both faces of the blade, because a surface etch will not. Number 5, the Remington Bullet. This is the one non-collectors have sometimes heard of. Remington made pocket knives with a bullet-shaped shield inlaid into the handle, and the shield is the identifier. An early 1900s Remington Bullet runs about $875. What to look for: the shield. It is a small metal inlay set into the handle slab, shaped like a cartridge lying on its side. Then the Tang stamp, because Remington's knife production had a defined window and reproductions of the bullet shield exist. And check the shield sits flush and clean in the handle rather than proud or gappy, which is a sign it has been swapped in. Number 4, case tested in green bone. Now we are into the case era knives, and this is where the Tang stamp from the beginning of the video does its work. A case tested pattern 6151 with a green bone handle and a carbon steel blade runs about $1,050. What to look for: tested on the Tang, which puts it between about 1920 and 1940. Then the bone, and specifically the color, because bone was dyed and green is one of the desirable ones. Then the pattern number, which case stamped as well, and which tells a collector the exact shape and handle combination. Number 3, W.R. Case & Sons, the very early ones. Older still, W.R. Case & Sons knives from about 1905 to 1914 with Rogers bone handles and nickel silver bolsters. A combo pattern 6251 from that window runs about $1,295. What to look for: the full W.R. Case & Sons name on the Tang, rather than the shorter, later stamps. Bolsters, which are the metal end caps on the handle, in nickel silver rather than steel. And the bone, because Rogers bone has a particular jigged texture that collectors identify on sight. Number 2, case XX with a pearl handle. A case XX Whittler, pattern 8308, with a genuine mother of pearl handle and 3 blades, runs about $1,500. The 8 at the front of that pattern number is not decoration. In case numbering, the first digit is the handle material, and 8 means pearl. So the pattern number itself tells you what you are holding before you have even looked properly. What to look for: pearl shifts color and depth as you tilt it, and plastic imitations do not. 3 blades on a Whittler, all of them opening from the same end in a particular arrangement. And the double X stamp, putting it in that 1940 to mid-60s window. Number 1, case XX Stag folding buoy. The top of the ones we have looked at is a case XX 551, a large folding buoy with a Stag handle and its original sheath at about $1,550. Everything that makes money in this category is in that one knife. It is case in the XX era. It is Stag. It is a large and uncommon pattern rather than an everyday carry shape. And it has its sheath, which is the equivalent of a box, and which almost never survives. What to look for: the 5 in front of the pattern number, because in case numbering 5 means Stag. The double X stamp, blade full width and unground, and the sheath, because on a knife like this, the sheath alone is a meaningful part of the number. Now cleaning, because this is where people lose money in about a minute. Do not sand a blade. Do not take a wire wheel or a buffing wheel to it. Do not put a rusty knife in a rust remover bath before you know what it is. Every one of those things removes the Tang stamp, and the Tang stamp is the thing that identifies the knife. A knife with a stamp polished off is worth a fraction of the same knife dirty, because nobody can prove what it is anymore. Light surface rust is fine, and collectors expect it. Oil the joint, wipe the blade with a cloth, and leave it there. And do not sharpen it. It is tempting because a dull old knife feels like it wants sharpening. Sharpening is what produces the reprofile blade I mentioned earlier. And on a knife worth real money, it is the single most expensive thing you can do to it with your own hands.
Right.
Before you go, here is the whole video in 4 lines. 1. Open every blade and read the Tang, because the stamp is a date, and the date is most of the price. 2. Look at the handle. Plastic and wood at the bottom, then bone, then stag, then pearl at the top. 3. Check the snap and the blade width, because a dead spring or a ground down blade cancels most of what the first 2 gave you. 4. Do not clean it, do not sharpen it, and do not polish the stamp off. That is it. Go through the drawer tonight, open everything, and you will know within a minute whether anything in there is worth a closer look. If this was useful, subscribe. And tell me in the comments what your Tang stamps say. I read all of them, and I will tell you what you have.